when we get to your presentation. And we're going to go right into the 12th week, the 12th web session, which is our final web session of this semester. We do have our spring cohort sign up open, so you can go to xAPIcohort.com and sign up for that. We have 5 teams presenting today. So we have Team Zoom, Adaptive Learning, Early Childhood Education, Storyline Engagement, and Kaltura, which means we'll go a little over today, but that's fine. Lots of learning taking place, and if you're not able to stay past 3 o'clock, no problem. You can always catch the recording after. Today we have Jamie and myself behind the scenes to produce and help run the show. So thank you, Jamie, for doing all of the testing this week and helping our teams feel ready for their demos. Really appreciate that. Today, again, we're at that final week, but don't worry, if you haven't gotten a chance to present on behalf of your team and your project, you can always sign up to present at the party, and I think that Megan will be able to fill us in about the party later today, so that'll be really exciting. We have lots of updates there for you. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Team Zoom. And we're gonna get the team up on the screen, and I believe that is Matt and Brian and Martin and that's all.
Miranda George will also be presenting with us.
Okay, Miranda, I think you need to activate your camera so that we can add you to the screen. There you go. All right, all set, team.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. Thanks everyone for being here. We are Team Zoom, some of the members of Team Zoom, and we'll be taking you today through the work that we did in this cohort to use xAPI and some Zoom developer tools to measure the engagement of participants within Zoom calls. So we'll first start with introductions. My name is Brian Wanzer. I'm an instructional designer at PitchBook Data here in Seattle, Washington.
Oh, I guess are we just going to go around? I'm Matt Cleaver, developer here at Torrance Learning.
Hi, I'm Martin Kobe. I own a company called Video Linkwell, and which makes software that I hope to incorporate xAPI into.
And my name is Miranda. I am an instructional designer at Infinitude Creative Group in Plano, Texas, which is near Dallas, Texas.
Oh, and I'm from Toronto.
Awesome. So as I mentioned in the introduction, we were looking to answer this question that's on the screen. Obviously, in 2020, Zoom became a heavily used resource for many organizations. Not just in the training space. We were obviously focusing a little bit more on those virtual trainings and looking at ways if there were ways to measure not only if people were involved in Zoom calls, right, just there being present, but being engaged as well. So we looked at some of the engagement data that you see on the screen there. So again, who attended, but how long they were there as well. Right? Did they just sign in at the beginning? Were they there for the entire meeting, the entire training? How often did they speak? How long did they speak for? Were they typing in the chat? Or were they responding to polls? Were they sharing their screen, right? Lots of different ways that somebody might be engaged within a training within Zoom. And we wanted to capture some of that information and then be able to craft xAPI statements based on that. Of course, lots of important information there, right? Attendance being a sort of basic one. We want to make sure that people who are supposed to be at the training were at the training. But also lots of information that facilitators or instructional designers or leaders within an organization can use to improve the engagement of a training. be able to see how often people were involved, create a baseline, see improvement, right? Lots of important information, I think, to be captured there. So our solution used Zoom API tools, a few different capabilities within Zoom to capture some sort of metadata about calls and meetings, and then created some software to create xAPI statements after parsing through some of that data that we were just talking about, and then sending off those statements to an LRS. We had lots of ideas of different ways to engage, measure engagement. The thing that we really focused on for this cohort was attendance, who was there, how long were they there, and the time that they spent speaking in the meeting, how often it was, what was the percentage based off of the total time, all of those kinds of things. So I'm going to pass it off to Miranda, who is going to take us through a quick little demo of some of the statements that we created.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, so we did a demo, and the object of this demo was to make a Brady Bunch style photo. Lots of opportunities for us to engage in the app, and of course we pre-assigned a few things to see if we could in fact read that data. So Martin, who's in the bottom left of the screen, we asked him not to speak the entire time to see if we gather data about that. I showed up rather late. Brian would jump in and out of the call, and we wanted to see if we could capture all of that data. And we did. So as you can see here on the statement viewer, we have data on who joined and left, and we have data on who attended. And with that, we have extensions that describe those statements further. For example, Brian Wanzer attended our meeting. The object is below that in the statement. But here in this extension, we learned that he was in attendance 96% of the time, and that he only spoke 6% of the time. So for a facilitator who wants their people to talk a little bit more, that facilitator will then be able to go, okay, I want to increase how much Brian's speaking in the meeting. I think I'm going to engage him more in future meetings. So that's just an example of how the statement data can be used. And now I'm going to pass it over to Martin, who's going to talk about our process.
Okay, so like Brian said, at first we just thought, what kind of use cases would there be? So if you're leading a discussion group, like a master's student, and you're having things like that. Or we also talked about different ways, different things you can do in Zoom and whether or not you could capture that data. So we tried things like doing the reactions, you know, like the thumbs up and the heart and whatever. We tried things like video on and off, audio mute and on, off. We found that a lot of those couldn't, because then the next thing we did was we went, what can you actually retrieve from the Zoom API? And we found that there were some that we could, so like the left and joined, the amount spoken we got from there's an option to record a transcript. So that could be processed further to add up all of the time spoken. And also there were two types of calls we would use. We'd use webhooks, we could do things like joined and left. Some of the other data, we had to wait until all the transcript was processed and that would be done post-meeting. Then once that was done, and we decided what we wanted and which API calls and which webhooks we'd use, then came writing the code to retrieve those. And that fell to Matthew, since he was the resident expert on all things JavaScript. And then the next stage was back to something that the non-coders could do or participate in, and it was a group thing, was like construct the API statement. So look up what was the most appropriate verb. So go through the dictionaries of verbs, and there was an attended, and then decide how to represent all of the other data with extensions. And once that was done, then the code had to be made to create those statements using the retrieved data. So again, back to Matthew. And then testing it out and doing our demo, and that was sort of the end of the process. But this process would be the same, I think, for anything where you're using an API that's not, like Zoom isn't intended, didn't put out an API likely to think, oh, you could use this for API statements. So maybe in the future we could ask them can they make more of that accessible, like reactions or other things like that. And I don't have the list of who's next in front of me, so I'm not sure who does the next slide.
That is me. So thanks, Martin. So a little bit of the tools and process of how we kind of went through some of this. So as explained, there's Zoom has an API that's I don't know how long they've had this API public, but it's been around long enough that they have decent documentation for most of it. So there's a couple different ways you can set it up. You need to set up credentials, and there's authorization and tokens and things like that. So there's some of that we had to kind of think about. And so there's different kinds of API. So there's just an API that you can request information from, and they'll return that data. So you can say, I want information about this meeting, and it will return that data. But they also have webhooks. So if you're not familiar with webhooks, as it says here, they're messages sent from apps when something happens. So basically, when something in the app occurs, you can say, I want to trigger something to happen. So in this case, there's actually a big list of things, and we can send all this data if anybody's interested in the things that you can hook into. But the two things that we started out with were joining and leaving a meeting. So a participant joins and leaves. So it kind of happens roughly real time. So when somebody joins, Zoom sends a webhook to a particular endpoint. So it's another API endpoint where you can respond to it. So we used a service called Glitch. It's glitch.com. It's basically sort of a collaborative coding platform, but you can kind of test out some apps. So we built this one in Node.js. So it's just a little JavaScript. So there's kind of a back end there, but it basically just has like a running server that you can, basically in this case, catch that webhook. So Zoom, somebody joins or leaves, it sends it to this app, and then you can write code to respond to that. So we did that and then sent our statements to Veracity LRS. We just set up a trial account there. So you can see here at the bottom, we have we just used left and joined. For our verbs, we looked at the xAPI vocab server. There wasn't anything. I think these might be using some of the older activity streams verbs. I can't remember, but left and join seem to work here. So, and like I said, that's roughly real time. The one thing about it, when you have these webhooks, there's only a smaller amount of data that they send in those webhooks. So each webhook has a payload of data about that event, and there's not a whole lot of data in there, but there's enough to just give us an idea. And we can't populate a whole bunch of extensions or anything in those. But so this is an example of a join. Is this a join? No, it's a left. So Brian left a meeting. You can see in the extensions roughly 3/4 of the way down. There's two extensions right now that I was able to put in there from the data that came through that webhook, plan duration and plan start time. And that is because we don't know how long yet that Brian has been in that meeting. We just know that the meeting is scheduled for an hour, started at 2100 hours. So those are the only two extensions right now in that one. So, but it still gives us an idea of when people are joining or leaving, especially if they do it multiple times. And then after the call, this is where we actually use the API directly to request information. So that once the meeting was actually completed, then we can gather and collect data about all the participants and all their activity during the meeting. So we use the attended verb because we figured, well, at the very least, we want to say how many participants were 4 people. These 4 people each attended, and then we can use that to start to populate. So there's still a webhook when So in our case, because we wanted to get information about, oh, we're running on our time here. So we wanted to get information about, engagement. So there's a lot of data back and forth with the API. We combined like 4 APIs to be able to get attendance statements that embedded within those is the percent and duration attendance, taking the transcript, parsing it, calculating all the times where people spoke into a duration and calculating all that, sending those in extensions. So we have some work to do maybe in future cohorts to try to clean some of that up and have shared, recorded other statements that we could send in there. But this gave us our sort of goal there for this project. And here's an example of some future things. We wanted to get some chat information, polls. Those are some webhooks that you can do. Screen sharing. That's another one that we could do with the data we have right now is screen sharing. So just haven't got through that part of it yet. And what we learned, and so some of the first here I'll start. Once the initial work is done, so there's some challenges in getting the API, massaging all that data, and getting it to fit into xAPI, especially because there's always quirks with APIs, like, oh, I got to encode this before I do that. And so, but then once we got the framework down, now we can start to do some of the more beneficial stuff of getting the actual statements.
And what I learned, Martin mentioned it a little bit earlier, but there are some limitations within Zoom API. So I know Cindy mentioned it in the chat, interested in if the Zoom meeting was actually active on the screen. We were interested in sort of the green check yes, red X no, taking a break, some of the reactions within Zoom as well. We were hoping to be able to get some of that information to get a little bit more dialed in terms of engagement. Those things just aren't possible with Zoom's API at this point. So that was something I picked up.
And basically, I rediscovered xAPI. Several years ago, I was looking up SCORM and discovered Tin Can, and I thought this is way better than that. Very granular. You could put all these learning things in, and then through xAPI Cohort and through this whole process, it's sort of that is realized now. So, and they've advanced so much more than when I first encountered it. And Miranda?
I'll just be short and say I was cured of developer FOMO, fear of missing out. I think what made me shy and what made me what I thought was going to be my being a perpetual lurker on xAPI Cohort. This is the first semester I've actually participated in a group, and even though I've done a few tutorials here and there. This is what they say in the jazz world is called jamming with the heavies. And so I feel like the rest of my team were the heavies, these people who have been there and done that. And so I learned that way. I got to ask questions. They knew the answers. And the people on this team were so impressive, and it encourages me to learn more. So I'm setting my goals for next spring already. So you don't have to be able to do everything, and you don't have to know everything. I ended up being able to contribute to the use cases a lot because I'm a former teacher. So you'll be surprised what you can bring. So that's what I learned. Thanks for watching our presentation. If you have any questions, I know we're short on time, feel free to join Team Zoom and engage with us. And over to you, Jess.
Awesome. That was such a great presentation. Great job, team. And I'm so excited that you've gotten over your FOMO, Miranda. I'm gonna bring Brady on now, who's gonna present on Team Adaptive Learning and share his screen. I see you on your camera, and we can hear you fine, Brady. And the way that you would do that is if you go up to the tools. Actually, I might have to make you a moderator. I apologize for that. Once I make you a moderator, which is done now, you go up to tools. Do you see the tools bar?
Yep, I see it now.
There you go.
Awesome. So I am one part of Team Adaptive Learning. There was probably about 10 people that contributed to the team. So thanks to everybody that contributed. This was a continuation from a team that started in the winter fall 2020 the spring winter 2020 cohort. So we started the plugin that we are working on then, and we did not finish it, but we got a little bit farther, which is good. So the goal of this team was to create an adaptive learning plugin using WordPress and using the xAPI as its data source. So the plugin, I think everyone can see my screen now. When you install it, you'll see a little option on the left side here. And with the plugin comes a couple of different WordPress post types. So the 3 post types that it comes with are modules, nodes, and assessments. And so modules is the parent post type that all the nodes and the assessments belong to. So if you think of it like a storyline file, a module is the file, and then the nodes and assessments are the slides within that file. So a node is where we house all the instructional content. And so if I open one up here, you can see it's, for the most part, it's a basic WordPress post, and then it has a title and a place where you can enter content in here. You can also choose the parent module, and this is what associates it with the module. It has an object ID, which we're using for xAPI purposes. It also has a content type, and there are several different content types here. These don't actually do anything functionally. They just keep track of the content type of the specific node. And then we also have a difficulty drop down here, and we can choose between 1, 2, or 3. And so we don't have much interesting content in here right now, but just like any WordPress post, we can put text in here, we can put images, we can put videos. We could even create a storyline object and host it somewhere else on the web, and then just add an iframe element in here if we wanted to get some more interactivity. And then the last thing about a node is that it has an expert model items block here, and we can choose from our expert model items, and I'll go over this in a little bit when I go over that taxonomy. And then the assessments is very similar to node post types. There's the title, there's content, expert model items as well. We can choose the parent module, the difficulty, the object ID, which is not editable, just like the nodes, and then the different options, and then which option is correct. So those are the 3 different post types. And then the expert model items is a WordPress taxonomy. And the way it's if anyone's familiar with WordPress, is just like a category, but it's just a custom one. And you can think of this in the way that we're using it, like learning objectives. So in this case, we're building a xAPI module, and we want people to know about the actor, the object, and the verb elements. And we want them to progress to a level 3 by the end of it. And so this is what sort of ties everything together. So I'll just go back to a node. So if I was to create a node and I wanted it to relate it to an actor, the actor expert model item, I would just click that here, and then this is what associates with that expert model item. And then also I could do the same thing for assessments as well. And then the other thing the plugin comes with is a settings screen. And the first part up here are the LRS details, and this is where we can add the endpoint and the key and the secret. And this is nice because none of this is exposed in the JavaScript, so it's all secure in the backend, so no one has access to it. And then this is the object ID format that we're using. So anytime an assessment or node gets created, rather than having to manually make sure the object ID is the same across all of these, we have this format. And then when one of those post types is created, it just puts a slash and then the ID of the post in there, so it happens all automatically. And so one of the things about adaptive learning is that you need a lot of content and assessments to be effective. So for example, if a learner has seen some content on the object element, and then they get a question and they don't get that question right, you want to show them ideally different content that they've already seen, because that content obviously didn't work. And then you want then you want to ask them a different question. So you end up having a whack load of content. So one of the things that Joanne put together is a CSV file for both assessments and nodes, and this allowed us to bulk upload content, which is really, really handy. So we can select the title, content, the expert model item, all of the meta boxes in the bottom, so the difficulty level, all the options, the correct answer, and the parent ID. So that way, as opposed to, I think there's about 45 assessments here, rather than manually going in to create these things in WordPress, we can just do it all in a batch. And then right now we just have placeholder content in here, but you could do this with real stuff as well. So the next kind of thing to figure out was what statements we want to send from each of those content types. So what we did, this is something that Izzy, Jeremy, and I worked on, is we took a look at the different fields within these post types. And then we determined A, what fields we want to send across in the xAPI statements, and then B, what format we want to send them in. So we just created a Google slideshow, and then in the slideshow, we included all the fields that we have, and then Izzy put together these statements at the bottom. And so what we did with these statements is that we put them into the code, and then wherever there was dynamic information, we pull that stuff from WordPress. So for example, the actor, WordPress looks to see who the current logged in user is and replaces this highlighted text with whoever that user is. And there's a whole bunch of different things that get replaced in here. So the next part we kind of started to think about is the sequencing. We wanted to try to keep it relatively simple initially, because there's obviously a lot of complex things you can do with adaptive learning, but we wanted to keep it simple initially and then go to something more complex. So we created a sort of logic to follow first. So when somebody, we're going to assume here that somebody starts, let's say, in the actor element. So they'll get a question of difficulty level 1. If they get it correct, they automatically move to a question of difficulty level 2. If they get that correct, they get a question of difficulty level 3. And if they get that correct, then they're basically masters of that expert model item. They can move on to the verb, for example. But if they ever get a question wrong, they see content related to that expert model item. So the idea was that we would create the LRS to determine content that they haven't seen before, and then it would send them back up here, and then they would get into the questions again. So this is basically the first crack at the sequencing. So I could show you what happens when a module is started. So we created this module page, and this is this is the entry point to all of the content. So if I click Start Module here, what the plugin is doing in the background is we're using the state resource, which is something I think we're all new to. It was really, really, really interesting to use, but it's gonna. So what happens when somebody clicks Start is that it's going to check if a state exists. If it exists, that state has a bookmark URL. And if it has a bookmark URL, it's going to send them automatically to that either node or assessment. So you could go through this and then leave and then come back, press Start Module again, and you'll start where you left off. If there's no state, it's automatically going to create that state, and then it's going to, just like in the adaptive logic model, it's going to send them to an assessment of difficulty level 1 for an expert model item. So if I click that, it's going to send me to this assessment. One of the other things that we did here was that we put a confidence functionality in here. So this is something that gets sent across in the xAPI statement. So this is if somebody answers a question and they select that they don't know, this is basically just a guess. They have a confidence of 1. This is a 2. This is a 3. We're not using this to sequence right now, but we're sending this in the xAPI statement, so we could in the future. So if we select the correct answer, and it doesn't matter which one I click here, it tells me that the answer is correct, and then it's going to send me to a level 2 of that same expert model item. So now I'm on level 2 of the same expert model item. the object. I'm going to click a wrong answer. It's going to tell me that it's wrong. And then it's going to send me to a piece of instruction. And so I can, right now it's set up so it's going to show you 2 pieces of instruction before it asks you for another question. So I'll click continue here. And so the page did reload, but it's not set up to show a different piece of instruction right now. That's something that we have to do. So if I press continue again, now that it's seen the 2, it's going to re-ask me a question of level 2 on the expert model item. So this time I'll say correct answer. It's going to tell me that's correct, and it's going to move me to level 3. So, and then once this was answered correctly, it would bring me to the next expert model item, which could be verb or object, or verb or actor in this case. And that would be it. So yeah, one of the things that was really interesting in this project is how much we use state. And the state, the way that we used it is you can save state in pairs of actor and object. So in this case, I'm looking for a state that's associated with my email and the module. And then I'm just retrieving that. And then based on what I retrieve, I can manipulate that, make decisions, and then send it back up and store it. So that was really, really useful. And that, yeah, that's about it.
Hey, Brady, you have a question. Did you and the team create this plugin, or are you using an existing one?
We created this. Yep. We created it. We started in the fall of 2020, and this is where it got to now. So there's a lot more to do, but yeah, we all created it.
That's great work. That's awesome. You're getting lots of positive feedback. And while if you have further questions for Brady, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to bring up Joanne next with Team ECE. Thank you for that. That was great, Brady. Love to see the iterations and how this project has grown over time. And
hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start so we can get this going. All right. Oh, this isn't my presentation. Right. I'm sorry. Libby Webb says in Learning Pool blog, and I'll send you the link to it, the opportunity to reflect on our experience is vital to the learning process. It encourages learners to take charge of their own learning. It builds stronger connections between learning experiences. It generates useful feedback for better course design, and it sparks social interaction. She concludes by saying that reflection is easier said than done. And so I wanted to explore reflection as a tool for learning. So here's my attempt to make my learning from the fall 20 xAPI cohort visible. Okay, so I'm going to go through the week. So week 1 and 2 is what is xAPI and what is the xAPI cohort. And so I came to xAPI from designing K-12 Common Core assessments. For me, xAPI promised to capture the experience of authentic learning and could possibly stop the standardized testing madness. I was encouraged to see that the different communities of practice were coming together around it, so there was a diversity in design and that it was part of a much larger system of solutions, such as CAS, which focuses on the knowledge, skills, and abilities of a learner. So I was sold on xAPI that it could capture the rich learning experiences, and CAS could allow us to focus more on what a child can do than what he fails at. So this semester, I set out to test my hypothesis on Tinkergarten, shown here, which is a nature-based learning program. Okay, so during my research, I came across this Path to Learning podcast, which is a series of interviews that explores and promotes early childhood education through the work of Friedrich Froebel, who pretty much was the inventor of kindergarten. And along with the others that are involved in this podcast that promote child-focused holistic learning. And then as as Julie Wilson says, and it's shown here in one of the interviews, the current system was built for a fundamentally different era. We have fundamentally different problems with fundamentally different opportunities. If we raise yet another generation of children within the standardized system, we will only perpetuate the current situation we have. And so when I listened to all of these podcasts, I was like floored, and I was just so inspired. But it's like when you listen to what Freuble designed for kindergarten, you know that these people have the answer. But yet over and over again, I just kept hearing that what's holding them back is the demand for assessment scores. They're struggling to get programs funding because it doesn't fit into the system. And so when I listened to these stories, I just became so inspired to find the solution in Cohort. And so, and then that's what, I wanted to talk about what Cohort is. And Cohort is project-based learning. It's a possibility space around the learning experience. It's hands-on, community-based, sharing of knowledge, skills, and resources. It's standing on the shoulders of the people and the work that was done in previous cohorts. Learning by doing is so much of a deeper learning. And the community-based learning that the Path to Learning interviewees are looking for, the answer's right here. And so, I just wanted to really get into, so I just really focused on what is this? So looking at weeks 3 to 4, it talks about sending and receiving data. And so I looked at the past cohort work and it confirmed that xAPI allows learning data to be captured by voice, QR codes, ebooks, in adaptive ways, and a number of Internet of Things devices. And so, in the olden days, I worked with XML to design learning solutions. And so I have this whole new world of JavaScript and JSON. And I can't express enough the value of project-based learning when it comes to learning code. And just as I saw with the Path of Learning podcast stories, when learning is engaging, it's so much more meaningful. Okay, so then when I want to now look at weeks 6 to 8 with the profiles and the learning ecosystem that's there. So the new xAPI vocab server, which Becky on Adaptive Learning pointed me towards, and then it was introduced during this week, it was a great help. The sessions during the cohort were such a good help, and I set out to follow each one of these steps in my learning. And so the first step is defining use cases. So I downloaded the template and I began researching the use cases. And so what I'm seeing is that the pedagogical documentation cycle of observe, reflect, analyze, and recommend is key. And then this is an evidence-based approach that involves the community of learners, parents, it's a community of learners. And then rubrics are becoming a very critical piece of this evaluation. So working in Twine, I mapped out the learning environment as I see it. The student, the teacher, the family, they're all in the learning cycle with research-driven resources, materials, techniques, strategies, and technology solutions, all contributing to a learning plan in an observation, reflection, analysis, and recommendation cycle. Okay, so then the next step is author and reuse. And so I went through the vocab server just to see what was already defined and see what I could use and pick up. And so verbs like progress, mastered, they can be used along, and then progress can be used along with this scale in the results section to measure progressions. xAPI supports the images, videos, and reflections that make learning visible through the attachments. Here, rubrics. This link here, it's an incredible database of rubrics that can be supported in xAPI extensions. So Julie is working with the Institute of Future Learning, and she is building together all of these awesome rubrics that could be really support here. And so and then that's what xAPI supports, all the work that she is doing. And so then coming back, then finally, I found that although there's no verb for reflected, the ECE profile calls for the use of the verb commented. And xAPI provides a means to link back to then the statement of the assertion where, there was progression or there was mastery. And so then all of these comments from the parents, from everyone can then be linked to that. And that's at core of what xAPI does. And then all of the evidence is attached to that. And then digging further into, some of the different profiles, I came across this learning plan and goal. Am I in the right? And so finally, I think that the activity type of learning plan and goal can be used to, help this, find the solution, because it could be used to identify and compare different learning solutions. And so in then the process, the next step is to prototype and refine. So I think I accomplished what I set out to do. I was able to create a functional example and send statements to SCORM Cloud. And if you look at the SCORM Cloud here, you can see there's a cycle of student-teacher performance, student, family, teacher reflection, and then finally, there's an analysis of both the teaching and the learning, and then a recommendation, and then the cycle can continue. And then you could draw out, okay, this learning path was used, this goal was, tried to attain, and then we can do that. And so, so let me go to the next slide. So, as this was like more of a theoretical exploration, this session, in the work that I have generic terms rather than the actual Tinkergarten content that I originally planned to. So again, like the same with what Brady was just saying, this is an iterative process and it needs testing and adoption, and it's just, we just grow and we just, continue to add to it. But, the work that ADL is doing, of which xAPI is just a part of, it really can bring change to early childhood and K-12 education. And the more I look into ADL, the more I'm convinced that, and xAPI, that it's needed right now for early childhood education. And it's like I just implore everyone to really just get involved, hop on anything, any project team. And it was like all of the case studies that we saw were very valuable. But I really wanted to speak to what Jason said in week 7, because he brought up the issue of mapping standards to promote greater interoperability. And for any of this to work, the learning assets need to be tagged and mapped to standards. And just as Julie's working on the database of rubrics, learning providers need to add tags and structure to the learning assets so that they can be mapped back to learning goals and learning processes. And this is exactly what Brady was referring to, because it's holding back, adaptive learning too. And so I wanted to steer you in the direction, talking about standards and mapping, I wanted to steer in the directions of these companies, these types of companies, because they could provide the mapping to standards, the OER curation, alignment, scaffolding, analytics, and the content engineering that's needed on the front end. And because once we have that structured, tagged learning content as assets, we can begin the data collection, the analysis, and the recommendations that can reform early childhood education, and it's so much needed right now. But without the structure, it's going to be so difficult, and that's really what we heard Jason say. And then there was something else in week 9 that really hit me. This was what Megan had said, and she said it's a very important space for us to be learning experience designers, as learning engineers, to really be made aware of what's going on in the space around us. And we can't be talking about interoperability and shared data specs unless we are actually looking across the entire learning experience. And so even here, I think in cohort, we're living in bubbles. And it's like, I really just feel like this is the time, this is the now, that we just have to start breaking the bubbles and start sharing our knowledge, sharing our content, and getting to that community where, we really are servicing early childhood and really authentic learning. And so I just want to, anybody who has time or resources or anything is just, the reason that this isn't working is just because they can't measure it, and it's like xAPI is the answer. And so I really believe this is a solution, and I'll continue to advocate for ADL, for early childhood education.
Joanne, I always love your passion. As a former educator, this really excites me. You have 2 questions. Okay. When there's no verb for a concept so fundamental for education, such as reflected, is there a way to define your own verb to have it added to the dictionary or proposed to ADL? Have you?
Yes, and that's exactly what that's why I want to connect in. This is a community of practice, and so that's what it's like. I'm just want to put that out there, and it is a community of practice, and I'm just one person, content engineer person, but it's like I need experts to really say what this is.
Have you considered a concept paper to submit to the ADL for a K-12 set of verbs that align to standards?
To be honest, I struggle with that, and I really need a team to help me with it. And that's why I came to Cohort, because it's here. And so like that's here. That's not me. I'm a content engineer. I'm the spreadsheet that you saw before that Brady did. And I can help, get those tagging done. And like, I can bring that. That's my skill set that I bring. But I'm not the marketing person. I'm not that. And that's why, like, I need that in order for this to go. It's a community that makes it. And that's what Cohort is. Cohort's the community where things will get done. It started from nothing, and look at what we have now. It's just amazing. And that's what I want to spread Cohort. I just think it's amazing. All right, that's all. I know I am so passionate about it. So
I love it. Well, thank you, Joanne. Thank you for your presentation. Next, we're going to have team storyline engagement come up. And I'm going to take you off of broadcast and add your presentation up. Matt.
Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm a member of the team storyline for the xAPI cohort.
Nope, we're going to wait till Matt is on the screen for that to play.
Cohort.
Matt, I think you need to activate your
on the right. It's hosted on Veracity Learning.
Mic and camera.
So, first thing I want to do is just enter my name.
So that I can add you to the broadcast.
It gives me a prompt whether to just verify if that's correct. Once I do that,
also have Kara.
To the menu.
Right
here, I just want to walk through just a few of the slides.
We see you, Kara.
Hi.
Click on Eating Well.
I may be the only one presenting for the group today because we have the videos and some challenges getting the sharing.
Each of the interactions that I'm doing.
Go ahead, Kara.
Going back to
the menu. I will begin. It's a little intimidating going after everyone who's already presented, but I will do that nonetheless. We have most everyone presenting their own work in the videos, but I'll really echo what I think everyone in our group was finding, that this really, the cohort has been a space to stand on each other's shoulders and learn from each other, because all of us really were so new to xAPI, and we were approaching it as finding out, exploring how do you collect and send data. And so two tools that we found really helpful were xAPI, and Matt will talk a little bit more about that, and then Veracity Learning, and I'll mention a little bit more about that at the end if we have time. So without any further ado, I will jump into Matt's video.
And it will automatically jump back to the menu. So I want to show you now the menu. Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm a member of the team storyline for the xAPI cohort, and I want to walk you through the course that I Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm a member of the team storyline for the xAPI cohort, and I want to walk you through the course that I built for this cohort. And this is it here on the right. It's hosted on Veracity Learning. And so first thing I want to do is just enter my name and submit it. It gives me a prompt whether to just verify if that's correct. Once I do that, it's going to take me to the menu. Here, I just want to walk through just a few of the slides. So click on Eating Well. Here it shows my name, and it also sends statements to the Veracity LRS with each of the interactions that I'm doing. Going back to the menu. And now I'll walk you through the video. So the video will send a statement to the LRS that the video started. They'll also, with these custom buttons here, I can trigger statements as well as pause the video and play the video. So there's the started statement and the video. Also, I've put a trigger on the audio, the custom JavaScript that reports the volume level as well as the change. When the video finishes, it will also send a statement that it's completed. And it will automatically jump back to the menu. So I want to show you now some of the statements as well as how I built this. So go ahead and exit course. Okay, and I can refresh the statements. You'll see that the video played, it paused, it started, but I didn't complete the video. I left the video early. But it also shows that I've experienced the main menu and in this training. So now I'm going to jump into how I built the statements and how I included them into Storyline. So briefly, I will show you. Okay, so here are this app called xAPI. It makes it really easy to create the scripts that need to be inserted inside of Storyline. So here is the statements that I created. First, you start out by creating activities here on the left, and these are different activities like whether they're a slide, the course, a video, and then the verbs and the statements are here on the right, and you can attach multiple statements to any activity. You can see some of the activities that I have here on the left, and the verbs and statements on the right. If I go into, say, this statement here, it will show you all the different options here on the left, and then the script on the right, where you copy and paste that into Storyline. So here's Storyline. I'm going to go ahead and enlarge that. So let's say when you click Submit, it's going to execute a JavaScript. So you add this trigger, and in the trigger, it's going to have this option to do JavaScript, and then you just copy it from xAPI and paste it here. So it makes it very easy, intuitive to use. And there's other steps as well that are explained in xAPI in the instructions on how to use this. But overall, that is how easy it is to use xAPI in Storyline, and makes it really interesting. You can track so much data from it. So I'm really glad that I could attend the xAPI cohort. This is my third year, and this is my first year with Storyline and first semester or cohort with the Storyline group. And it's been a really enriching and fun experience. So I really appreciate working with everyone and appreciate the opportunity to have this sort of support group and experts, as well as just collaborating with others. So thank you.
All right, and I'll give a huge call out to Matt for showing our group, giving our group a walkthrough for using xAPI, since that was a tool that helped bridge that novice gap for us who hadn't done any of the building the statements. I won't say any of the statements, but for me, bridging that gap was key. And when he helped us do it, that walkthrough, that kind of helped me just like jump and be able to actually get it working and be able to see the data showing up in Veracity. And that was kind of monumental for me, being able to both build them and to be able to see the data showing up and saying, oh, it works. It actually does. And on that note, I'll go into my short demonstration. I'll start off showing the scenario from here, where you can click for more information on the mindsets, and that explains further of the 2 learning objectives that I will collect data on, but I won't spend time on that right now. This is a choice that I'll collect information on whether they will select the scenarios, whether I often travel for work, travel on vacation, or whether they don't accept those and just exit. Most of the choices, there's 3 choices to choose from, and each one of them aligns with a learning objective that I'll send a statement that it matches. In this one, the 2 align with always doing something, and the other one aligned with embracing learning or new ideas. So I'll click on that one and send a statement. And the others have 3 choices and align with a different learning objective of setting specific goals. So a couple of them are more general and one is more specific. So I'll click one that is considered incorrect or more general. And from there, I'll go to looking at what was behind this when I built it. For deciding what data to collect, what statements to send, I first looked at it as a use case that I would want some for evaluation, looking at the learning objectives, and for that I would send statements of what was correct and incorrect. And to be able to look at the solution, I would look at, well, was the scenario acceptable and were any distractors rarely chosen? And I will skip this for now since I haven't implemented that yet. For planning, I also sketched out a hierarchy of the course and the verbs that I would use. So in the course, there's the course, Matt's section, his topics, one of the topics that was a subtopic, the road warrior, and then my scenario fell into that. And in my scenario, there were several pages, and within the pages, there were 3 buttons to press. And the statements that I would send are pressed. What this doesn't capture is that some of the pressed aligned with incorrect and some aligned with correct. So the raw version of what I did for that was export this to an Excel. This is largely the raw version, and then I compiled this a little bit more concisely to build the statements. I use xAPI to put together a statement structure, and then that Excel and a Microsoft Forms mail merge to put together the actual statements. But I will move on to what those statements produced. For example, in Veracity, one of those button choices pressed produced this statement. So it has the user community pressed, the object of the activity, the button on button choice on that page, and I can expand out the context, and the grouping that it's a correct choice, and I would do this differently later, but that's how it is right now, and that category that identifies it with the learning objective. And that's where I'll end mine.
I'm Jeff Riley, and I'm with the team Storyline Engagement, and my concept is to create a game in Storyline that I can put xAPI statements in to collect information beyond just that they completed the course. I sometimes work with clients, and in this case, we're building a course for compliance training. And we need to know what people are taking the course and where are they from and what's their title and their user experience in order to give the business a better picture of what's going on beyond a score, beyond completion, so that they can make sure that everybody's getting the training that they need and getting it on time. And so it's a different type of information. So I've created a game, in this case, called it Certification Cave, because since this person is taking this course now, because they didn't take the course like they should have the first time, they're going to be in this cave and they have to solve these problems to get out of the cave. And of course, they're going to have to answer business questions in order to pass and get out. And in this case, there are 4 different levels. And in each level, I'm selecting some of the different information that we wanted to find out. So to do that, of course, I'm not a JavaScript expert, so I needed help in building the statements. And that's when I found out about xAPI Builder. And as you can see here, I have to have different statements for the different type of information that I'm capturing. In this case, with the name, they're typing in information, the location, but here they're selecting a title. And here they're typing in numbers of years of experience. So I'm having to use this tool to get all this to happen. And then I loaded the course with the statements into Talent LMS, which then produced this report. And then from the report, the good news is I can thin that out, if you will. Well, first, with StormCloud, you do have to know your, you have to have a learning record store, and you have to have that information in order to pull all this together. But also then when I created the report, I was able to pull out exactly the entries that were made to prove to me that, yes, I'm collecting the data I need, not just the fact that the variable was there, which was one of the important things I had to learn, was how to set the code and how to set the, let's go over here, how to set this switch so that you're collecting the information about the variable, not the variable itself. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. I just realized I was muted before, but huge thanks to the team and especially Matt Hardy for giving us a walkthrough on xAPI early on. I think you're muted.
Got to pay attention to all the mutes on the interface. Thank you for that presentation and for the whole team for recording all of the different aspects. Right now, I'm going to present a share screen and a shared of the Kaltura, Team Kaltura's presentation. Unfortunately, their presenter has a meeting that they're not able to be here for, but what we do have is their xAPI current capabilities and suggestions for feature requests that we can display for you to see. And then Bethany is going to record a description of their project that we'll send out to you at a later time. So I'm going to do a screen share so that we can quickly look at some of their suggestions as a team to kind of see what they learned about Kaltura. So they did an overview, and this will be shared out in our weekly update as well so that you can review some of their work. They shared an update of what Kaltura Media Space is and its capabilities, and did a really, really thorough overview of some of the things on how it could be used in the workplace and the xAPI capabilities and what they mean. So they also linked in here the xAPI Analytics Guide. And this is great because we do have access to Kaltura, and you can use this as a tool. So all of these are what it's capable of producing in terms of statements. And then what's really interesting here is they've gone in and offered some suggestions or features that they would like to see come from Kaltura. So this is what I think would be the most valuable. I would love to hear what other people might think about Kaltura as we've been using it and navigating it throughout this semester. So they want to be able to set the points that are watched when an event is recorded. So if you wanted to report at 33, 66, or 99%, add a completed verb that triggers at a specific configurable watched percentage point. This will be better reporting efficiency since we wouldn't need to look for watch verbs as a result of 75 or 100%. Currently, all watch verb data is sent to the LRS, and it's a lot of information to filter through. They'd like to see more player actions, such as enabling or disabling captions, full screen, etc. When a video is commented on, and this was one that it looks like the team had a lot of agreement on, how can we add the full text comment in the statement? They want to be able to see view downloads, video shares via links, embeds, or emails, searches in videos, including the search text entered when a video is added to a playlist, and support for all data in the video quiz. They also went through and provided a snapshot of the Kaltura Analytics dashboard so that you can see the type of data that you see. It's a very robust dashboard. And then they also went through and provided, they'll provide a roadmap and have some appendices that kind of talk through what statements look like when they're produced from Kaltura. So again, this resource will be shared out with everyone, and we will also send out a recording of the team that's going to cover what their work was this semester. So thank you, Team Kaltura, for compiling that for us to review. The last part Yeah, it's a really great document with lots of information. The last thing I want to remind you of is the xAPI party, and I'm going to actually let Megan kind of share some updates here on the party. If you are still on the line, Megan. Oh, maybe not. She might have had to hop. But we still have, you can still register for the xAPI party. It is December 11th, fully online, and it is going throughout the day. So it is going to be a full global experience. If you're interested in presenting, there is still the call for proposals that is open. The link is there. And the link is also available in both the email update and in Slack under the main. Please, if you intend on presenting, all the teams who presented today would love to see you build on this and present at cohort at the party. And in order to do so, you need to fill out the call for proposals. With that, it's been a great semester. All of this learning presented today made me quite emotional. I'm really proud of all your teams and the work that you've done and the community that we have and will continue to build around data and interoperability. So have a great, great day, and I'll see you at the party.